With our lesson, Tim Junkins.
Good morning. Everybody doing all right? Good, I'm doing all right too. So we're off to a good start. There's this big misconception with people my age about the idea of growing up and growing older. Because when I was younger, you could have said, okay, when you turn, let's just say mid-20s, let's say 25, you go out, you find a wife, you get married, you settle down, and then things are just kind of downhill from there. Am I right? No, of course not. No, but it's this idea that when we're younger, we look at the idea of what is the point in which I become irrelevant in the eyes of the world. And like I said, there's this big misconception with people my age, especially in the idea of being famous and the idea of celebrity. The notion that there will be a time where our relevance to the world has passed and we just simply must live in anonymity. And for some, that is completely unacceptable. How we measure success today it feels different, but I think that's in partly because of things like the internet. I think it's in partly because of the way television produces things that they think should be famous. But I think the idea behind it, the core of it, has been the same for many years. In the music industry, there's this curse known as the 27 Club. It's the idea that there are so many musicians who have died at the age of 27, which is younger than I am now, that they have a term for it. And it's people going as far back as, Jimi Hendrix is in the 27 Club. When I was a kid, Kurt Cobain, the lead singer of Nirvana, committed suicide. Amy Winehouse died last year. And it's one of those things where you look at that and you look at their body of work and you listen to them, and especially in terms of musicians, you can listen to the work that they've put out and they have become immortalized in a sense through their work. If you listen to an album from somebody who has passed on, it doesn't matter in that moment because you're still listening to the music. You're still accepting it. And you don't think, oh, this person isn't around anymore to produce more music. And as far as the world goes, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to become immortalized, to leave your stamp on the world, and then simply check out. It's all right to have that kind of immortality. But we as Christians, we try and seek something different. But before we get to that, we look at the idea of why is fame measured in this way in the world? We look at the idea of biographical movies. Because if there's something we love as people, we love a tragic story. And of course, when I say we, I don't mean you guys in this room specifically, but we as a culture, we love the idea of the tragic story. You watch movies like Walk the Line or Beyond the Sea or The Life and Death of Peter Sellers, which is a completely insane biographical story about the actor Peter Sellers from movies like The Pink Panther and Dr. Strangelove and things like that. And you get this peek into his life and you see all these dark secrets and twists and turns and the affairs and the misdeeds and misgivings, and we look at the idea of this and we're drawn to it. It's where the idea of reality TV came from. The idea of, can't we have a show that is like that all the time? That is like this idea of behind the scenes, but all the time, where things are always bad and people are always fighting and they're double-crossing each other and they're backstabbing each other. And we look at this in the sense that we're drawn to it because we need to feel better about ourselves. We need to look at that and say, well, our lives aren't really that bad. We're totally fine. But in the same way that these young artists, these young musicians who have passed on through suicide and drug overdose, and they have left their mark on the world, but they have left before life really even got started. Because It's not the fact that I'm turning, oh, big news, everybody, I'm turning 30 this year. And I was having dinner with a friend last week, and she asked me, she's like, wow, are you really freaked out by that? And I'm like, no, it's a number. I suspect it'll be eerily similar to 29 and pretty close to 31 in terms of how I behave in my life. It's not that the clock is going to tick on my birthday and I'm going to say, okay, let's shut it down, people. We're done. I've done as much as I can. I can no longer contribute to the world. Because that is not really how we work as people. But once again, there's this big misconception about that. The idea that if you watch TV nowadays, it's all young, attractive people, and the idea that they can fade in anonymity. The idea that if you go back on Wikipedia or the internet and you look at the top Billboard charts, the top 100 songs from the year of 1972 or 75 or 1990, you probably couldn't think of who half of the artists are. Because they came in, they made their mark, and then they faded to anonymity. In the publication Psychology Today, Robert Fuller, PhD, wrote this about the idea of fame. Talking about the idea of people referred to as nobodies, the people who are not famous, the people who are anonymous. Nobodies are marginalized to the point of invisibility. Since humans are social creatures, banishment carries a threat of being deprived of social and material resources critical to health and happiness, and sometimes to survival itself. No wonder we're so sensitive to indignity. It poses an existential threat. Fame promises an escape from whatever ghetto we're in, real or imagined. It deters detractors and may even squeeze a few crumbs of recognition from those who have begrudged us a smile while we are clawing our way out of nobody land. It's no coincidence that Oscar winners enjoy both health and longer lives than their runners-up. And then in the article it links to an article by the BBC talking about the connection between Oscar winners and longer health. So what is fame to us? What is it? Because you look in every single market, you look in every job field, and there's some idea of fame. You can go to any kind of conference for your job, and there's always that rock star guy. There's always that person who, that's the famous guy. That's the guy who gets things done. And it doesn't matter what your job field is. There is somebody like that out there. There's somebody that is the respective alpha male or alpha female of the company or industry or whatever it is. And people look at that and they say, I want to emulate that. I want to be like that. I want to have that. Because that is what the world tells us we need to do. The world tells us that it is okay to be dead at 27 and immortalized in digital media than to live a full, happy life. If you turn your Bibles to Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 19, we're going to be looking at the idea of Jesus speaking out of the Sermon on the Mount, talking about what it is to have value in the world. When I spoke last time, when I spoke right before New Year's Eve, I talked about the numerical value of things, and this is an expansion on that idea. The idea that we can't assign things a 1-to-1 ratio. You cannot give both good and bad things a rating of 1, because then the bad things will always win. But ultimately, and of course I used the term, I described my nephew and my nieces as a tactical nuke of joy worth approximately 10 million points in terms of how my life goes. And I stand by that. I think that the good things in the world so outweigh the bad because of their value, not because of their number. Quality over quantity, if you will. But this is Jesus talking in Matthew 6 about the idea of treasures in heaven. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. We'll be continuing on in just a moment, but talking about the idea of what do we assign value to in terms of who we are. Who is famous in your life? What person is out there, what people are out there that bring so much betterment to your life that you would elevate them so much higher than the idea of celebrity? Who is greater than the greatest actor and singer and musician and writer and artist and all of these things? Who in your life is there in that capacity? But more importantly, Jesus talks about the idea of just sheer value on earth. He says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He talks about the physical nature of it. And this is always a tricky subject to talk about. Because it's so easy to say, just get rid of all your stuff. But the problem is, I like all my stuff. I worked hard for my stuff. You know, I sat last night clicking away on my computer, working on this lesson while watching a movie on my TV, and there are these things. So it's not to say that to get rid of that, but the idea of what do you value so much more. As much as I like that stuff, because I won't ever use the word love when it comes to the stuff I own. But as much as I like that stuff, there are things I love so much more. There are people I love so much more. And it's important to recognize the value in that. Continuing on, verse 22. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are unhealthy, if your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? The idea of, you look at the idea of eyes, of course, windows to the soul, etc., etc. You look at the notion of what do we look at, what do we see when we see people, when we evaluate them, when we evaluate circumstances in our life. The idea of keeping our eyes healthy. Because as much as I want to tiptoe around the subject of wealth and fame and power, there's inevitably a line that we must not cross as people. There is something out there where we go from light to darkness in terms of the value, in terms of the way that we see things. And so it is important to recognize that there is in fact a line, there is in fact a point where we go too far in assigning value to things. And we must be leery of that. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. How much money, how much fame is too much? That is not a question I can answer for you. Because it is a sense of introspection. It is internal reflecting. You have to determine how much money, how much fame is too much. Because there are celebrities I have seen who have gotten the smallest amount of fame. These young, extremely talented musicians who they go out and they get the recognition from the crowd. The crowd, the audience, the people assign value to them. And they take that so to heart that when the next album comes out and that recognition, that response, that love is just a little bit less, they've got to find a way to chase that high. And they turn to drugs and excessive drinking and excessive partying because they have to be at that high again all the time. That is too much fame. It is. It is too much fame to say that I rely so much on the wavering attitudes of people to make me happy. That is too much fame. How much money is too much money? I have seen celebrities with all the money on God's green earth, the one percenters and all that, who do amazing things with their money. Who go out and they do good and they do charitable things and they make the world a better place because they want to leave the world a better place than they have left it. I would dare say that is not too much money to have, even though they have so much more than I do. At the core of it, I think I'd make a bad rich person. That might be the reason I'm not rich, I don't know. But I think I'd be a terrible rich person. I really do. I think it would be too easy for me to just kind of laze about and not contribute anything. And of course I say that in half jest. I think ultimately, I would find some good to come from it. But ultimately, I'm one of those people who might just put too much value in things as opposed to people. And we look at this, and you can look at all these examples. The celebrities that I really invest in, the comedians I like, and the actors I like, and the musicians I like, are all the ones who are so humbled by the opportunity they have to make the world a better place. I listened to an interview with one the other day where he has been touring with his band for 20 years. And he will have just enough money to retire when it's over. Because he invests so much in touring and production and getting out there and just making people happy that in the end he's just going to retire. And that's going to be it, and he'll be okay with that. And that's the kind of person I think I'd like to emulate. The person who goes out there and does good, and in the end they can just set time aside for themselves and their loved ones and be content with that. You look at examples in the Bible, you look at the idea of the rich young ruler where Jesus boldly declaimed, sell all your things. You've got too much money. You know you've got too much money. You've been corrupted by it. You've got to get rid of it. And ultimately, 99.9% of the time, people probably aren't going to do that. They're going to keep digging their hole and going in deeper and deeper until it's too late to pull themselves out of it. And it's not a matter of money, per se. Like most of us will never be extraordinarily don't have to work, don't have to care rich. We're never going to reach that point in our lives. But there is still the opportunity to have too much. To say that I have become all consumed by this. I have lost my focus, my connection to God. Like I said earlier, I cannot tell you where there is too much corruption in your life. That is up to us. It is up to us to be wary and to recognize it. The point of having too much and removing yourselves and worshiping money over God is from the perspective of where you just stop caring about what's going on around you. Where your attitudes change towards people. The Bible constantly always warns about the idea of a hardening heart and crossing that point of no return. And it's not to say that there's a point where God is so done with us that we cannot return, but the point where we are so done with God that we refuse to. The point where we say, I've got everything I need and I don't need God anymore, is the terrifying point that we don't want to reach, but it is so easy to go that way. Because we live in such a world that idolizes such depravity. A world that idolizes such fame and says that you don't need God, you just need a lot of people to like you and recognize you. And that will carry you for a time. I've heard so many stories about people finding religion that starts with them being so alone and so far gone. And not just famous people, personal friends of mine who have specifically said that I found God because I pushed Him so far away and things got so bad in my life that I turned to God and I asked for forgiveness and He gave that forgiveness. Matthew 6 talks about a better path. It talks about specifically the value of things. Because celebrity can go away. We can fade into anonymity. The money can stop. The money can go away. The money can be stolen. Our homes can be broken into. Our things can be taken. So therefore, we must invest in something better. And if we invest in something, if we put our treasures in heaven, if we store them away, if we assign value to something that cannot be taken from us no matter what, if it doesn't wither away, if it doesn't get stolen, then it survives. And it is there. And it is there for us to draw upon. Jesus uses the term treasures in heaven because he wants to use the idea of monetary investment. In the same way that when we are hungry, we go and buy food. And when we need shelter, we go and buy a house, or we go rent a house, or something like that. The idea that if we invest our treasure in heaven, if we invest our treasure in Jesus Christ, then it will be there when we need to redeem that. When we need to spend that treasure, when we need to invest it, when we need to use it to make the world a better place, it will be there. Because it will not go away. It will not get stolen. It will not get embezzled. It will not, wither away. It will not rust. It will not be destroyed. It will always be there. And that is the path that Jesus talks about taking. The idea of you look at your personal life, you look at your own reflection, and you say, how much is too much? How much do I need to still be appreciative of those around me? My family members are more famous to me than any celebrity. Because of all the conversations that we've had, of all the memories that we've shared, of all the meals that we've shared, I am always inspired and encouraged by them. I am always willing to admit that they have helped me along the way and they have made me a better person. And that is the idea of spiritual treasure. The idea that that is not a resource that can go away. That is not something that can be destroyed or taken away from me. Those memories will always be there. That love will always be there. That love that comes directly from God. The idea that I was raised to believe in Jesus, and I was raised to understand that there is a better path. There's something out there to encourage you. Because that's really the most important thing when you think about it. The sheer level of encouragement that Jesus gives in this statement. Because it's so easy to look at the world and just shrug and be bitter about it. The idea that you look at these people, you look at their homes, and you say, I'm never going to have that. It's one of the most depressing things about working in the construction field. I made a delivery one day, just a quick anecdote and then we'll wrap up. I made a delivery one day over here in beautiful Montgomery County. And I pull up to this building and I'm unloading the material. And I look at this building and go, wow, what is this? Is this a community center? Or is this a school? And there's a guy standing there with a shovel and he's looking at me. He goes, no, this is some guy's house. Like, oh. And he goes, yeah, and over there, that's the tea house. Every day, the wife will go over there at 4 o'clock and have tea. The tea house is bigger than where I live. The house that they access one time a day for tea is bigger than where I live. And it's so easy to become discouraged by that. It's so easy, but I don't. Because I go home and I see my brother and my sister-in-law and my nieces, and that's fine. That's wonderful. That's so much better. And I don't know what that person's situation is in their life, and good for them for working hard and building this home. That's fine. That's fine. But don't let it get to you. Don't look at that. Don't look at this monolith, this brick and mortar, and say, this is enough for me. Be encouraged, be strengthened by what we have and what we don't have. Be comforted by the words of Jesus, who he constantly says, you go down to the next section of Matthew, and he says, don't worry. And he says, don't worry about what you're going to wear or what you're going to eat. And he goes on. And then, of course, he dies for our sins, as far as the narrative structure of the Bible. Because he wants to prove to us. He wants to just say, okay, you don't believe me. You don't believe my love is absolute. Watch this. And he dies for our sins. And that's incredible. And that power is so much bigger than all the money and all the building and everything else in the world and all the fame and all the celebrity. I am encouraged by the power of Jesus. If you're here today and you want to be part of that, if you need to be renewed by that encouragement, I ask you to meditate on that as we stand and sing the song of invitation.